Welcome to the Final Girls podcast. I'm Anna Bogutska, and as ever, I'm your podcast host. In this mini-series, we're exploring and celebrating The House of Psychotic Women, the seminal book by Kayla Janice.
What do you think? Go ahead, be honest, just tell me. You think I'm insane?
Are these women wrestling in an arena of mud?
No, I disgust you. I sicken you. You hate me.
But it's difficult, don't you understand? It's difficult. I didn't want it to happen, but it happened now.
Spooky season might be over, but we're not quite done yet. Published over a decade ago now, The House of Psychotic Women's ripple effects can be felt on a whole generation of horror fans, filmmakers, critics, and programmers, myself very much included. Kayla Janice's House of Psychotic Women is many things, as is its author. If you haven't read the book yet, I can't recommend it enough. It's a tome of film history, criticism, a study of female neurosis, and a memoir. And in this mini-series of the podcast, I'm talking to special guests, all filmmakers whose films have a psychotic woman at the heart of them, about a film featured in the book that inspired or influenced their work in some way. In the first episode, we dove deep into the themes and the writing of the book itself, and since then, I've been joined by Prana Bailey-Bond, director of Censor, Deborah Haywood, director of Pincushion, and today, I'm joined by Kane Senes and Hannah Barlow, co-directors of the glittergore gem Sissy, to talk about how the book and Carrie inspired their work. Kane and Hannah instantly chose Carrie, Brian De Palma's adaptation of Stephen King's first novel about a bullied teen with telekinetic powers who just snaps. We talk at length about their love for the film and the many ways it influenced their film, as well as their incredibly joyous relationship to Kayla's book. If you enjoyed this episode, do let me know. You can find me for now screaming into the void on Twitter at AnnaBDemented, and you can support the podcast over on Patreon or by leaving us a review on Apple or Spotify podcasts. And with all of that said, please join me in the House of Psychotic Women.
We're supposed to do it together, which we did. It's fine.
We got there. This is always the most awkward part. Nobody can ever clap. It's like if I ask someone to like count to 5 and just like, oh, 7. I don't know.
Do it again? Are we good?
Let's do it. 3, 2, 1.
You've got to include this in the recording.
Oh, it's going in. It's going in. We're struggling. It's a great start.
Do it again?
No.
That was
I'm on to my second whiskey here, so okay.
I really appreciate you guys making the time, especially considering the absolutely wild time difference that we have. You're on your whiskey, I'm on my tea. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
It's weird because it's like 11 hours, so it's almost the complete opposite. You know, it's almost 12 hours.
Yeah, we're on the opposite ends of the witching hour.
I love
it's
it.
All good.
So I want to start with you guys with the same question I've been asking to all my guests for this mini series, with a little bit of personal history. What is your relationship with House of Psychotic Women? When did you first encounter the book?
Well, you bought it for us.
Yeah, I was just I'm a big researcher, and I just remember when we were writing Sissy, and I was just researching, you know, what are the best books about slasher films or just kind of like feminist horror, all kinds of different buzzwords that I was throwing into the internet. And and this book just kind of came up a lot. And so it wasn't a very, I feel like we don't have like a very organic kind of story, but I guess it's our own story. Like it wasn't like someone recommended it from a friend, or we came upon it in hard times and it saved us. It was just research, and it came up, and we ordered a copy, and we basically started reading it through the script writing process, and mostly through pre-production.
I guess for me, because Kane's been like a horror hound, a fan of horror for so many years, and I was too, but I hadn't really acknowledged it until this book came along, because this book gave me permission to really see horror as a truly feminist space. And I feel like women have been kept at an arm's length from horror for so long. And Kayla has provided a Bible and a film school and a portal for us to connect to the space, because really the point that she continues to make is that horror puts a spotlight on the female psychosis in a way that no other genre realistically does. And so, reading this book and reading her sort of confessional diary entry into this genre gave me permission to also like put my ghouls on screen. And now I'm like, we're returning to it again in our next process after having made Sissy. So it's just really exciting to learn from her continuously.
Yeah, and there's like a lot of films in here. So I think by the time we've made like 10 movies, we'll probably have
finished it.
We'll have seen everything.
I love the way that you framed that, Hannah, the fact that the book gave you permission, which I think is such an apt word for, I think, a lot of people who find their way into the genre and, kind of almost start identifying themselves as horror fans. Everyone has this process, like either it's through a movie or someone giving them that kind of permission to be like, no, actually, this is good and I enjoy it and I'm here for this and it does all these different things for me. And I wanted to think, what did you guys make of the actual book itself? Because it's so many things at once. It's a memoir, it's a film history tome, it's a Bible and a guide for horror movies. Like, what do you make of the writing and the hybrid nature of it?
Can I throw in another word?
Yeah.
It's a time capsule.
So on brand.
Yeah.
I realized that today when we were like looking at it again. It really is a time capsule. It's nodding to so many eras of this brilliant genre, and I find it hard to wrap my head around what it is still, but I'm just grateful that it exists, because it is confessional. It's so, the way she opens up her soul to the reader is so, like, I don't want to say brave, but because it's almost reductive, but it's just it's a unifier, this book. And yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, it's probably it's got to be the most confessional form of like film criticism that I've ever seen. We think we're pretty kind of open people with our feelings and things, but some of the stuff that she puts in this book, it's like,
wow.
I don't know if I would like if I would put that out to the world, but I love that she does, and it reminds us like how, well, I know you don't want to say brave, but it's hard to find another word, but like how empowering that is, how powerful that is, and that she owns all those things and that they make up her story, and that in a way she finds, and I think this is what maybe we all see in horror and just in movies in general, like she finds so much commonality with so many of these characters and themes that it helped her through some of her darkest times. Like when you don't feel alone, that's when you can truly kind of get back on your feet and, face fear with a sense of power, and I think.
Yeah. Reclaim
the fear, like so many of these characters do in these movies, or at least the ones that I've seen. But it's just the confessional nature of it is really striking.
And it's also just like it's a wonderful roadmap and a mirror about like female emancipation. You know, that's what struck me the most. Like it's very, very brave to be expressing rage, because it's still not okay. It's still taboo for us to really share the taboo chambers of our hearts and minds, because women aren't perfect. We are not nurturers always. We are not loving and kind. We are all things that men are too. We have really dark recesses in ourselves, and I think that she is doing something that a lot of academics aren't doing, that also a lot of creatives aren't doing, which is kind of like paving a way towards emancipation. Like, let's not forget the history that has held us back. Let's explore it. And that's the road towards like freedom and expression, and actually reclaiming our birthright as women, which is our narrative, you know? So by putting hers on the page in connection to other artistic, you know, expressions of I don't know, horror, I guess, the things that scare us, we're able to do the same. And she's the first person to do it, I think. Like the first woman.
Yeah, the thing that I remember always striking, the thing I remember always being so striking about the book, even as I've read it, and, you know, I was thinking this on stage interviewing Kayla just this past weekend at Weird Weekend, was that it is so openly subjective. And I think that for journalists, for film critics, for anyone kind of writing about art in any kind, that's a dirty word. And one that you're even taught. I remember in university being literally told the whole point is about being objective, strip yourself away completely. But then that's so uninteresting for, you know, for me as a viewer, almost like what I want to know why this person decides that this is good or bad, because I wanted to be that person. But then I realized like, no, the whole point is like, what is everything that you are and who you are defines how you approach these things. So if you're trying to eradicate them, you're essentially trying to create this canon of, oh, no, this is good or bad, and nothing else matters. No other opinion matters. There is no other entry point into this. And Kayla's book, you know, 10 years on, reading it 10 years on after kind of became a professional critic and been working in the space for a while, it's so incredibly bold and so it came so early on that I don't think we fully got the power of this subjectivity, this open subjectivity on the page when it was first released. And it's been incredible to kind of think about it again after 10 years, seeing the impact that it's had on people.
Well, she was ahead of the game, right? Like, she is an influencer.
That is a dirty word.
She is.
Is this a segue I'm smelling?
She's influenced me.
she is an influencer, though. Like, I mean,
not the way that we think.
Not in a digital sense, but just in terms of like leading by example, right? It's kind of like, how can you tell people to be bold and open about their past and their trauma so that you can heal from it, so that you can, you know, throw the curtains open on those darkest things. Like, if you don't do it yourself, and she's on it, she's just gone out there in public and done it. And yes, I don't know what the audience was originally, whether it was a niche thing or not, but like, it's surely grown in time. And it was just so cool. Like we ran into her at the Fantasia. Well, we met her for the first time at the Fantasia Film Festival, because she's been like, we've just been on the festival circuit with our movie, and she's been doing a lot of the same thing. Just
because
kind of,
she's on her book tour.
Well, she's on her book tour, and it was really cool that the two coincided at Fantasia in Montreal, because, you know, like we were able to go to this talk that she gave, and it was like in a little kind of almost like a university lecture hall, where we were sitting with the desks, with the chairs with the fold up desks, and we were just listening to her whole life story and Cinema Muerte and all that early stuff that she went through. And it was just it was right around the time that like our local video store in Sydney, Australia, it was the last one left, was closing. And I was like really cut up about it, and just listening to her talk about, you know, her experiences running kind of these little local indie theaters.
Curating.
And she'd throw these nights on and do these, you know, these double bills or marathons
for
or whatever.
no money.
and just kind of being able to, I think be on the festival circuit after COVID and see what these midnight marathons were like at these horror festivals after hearing her talk about it back, I don't know when she was doing that, in the 70s or something, or no, the 80s.
90s?
80s,
90s.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Kayla, you're not that old. It was really it was moving. Like it's the first genre film we've made, but to be out in the genre circuit and to meet all the people that this is like their bread and butter, it's their life, it's unlike any other genre. Like when you're in a horror community or just a genre community in general, I like the stuff we've made in the past, it probably doesn't play to that. It's more kind of general, it's more something that you might see at like a broader festival. But being in the horror community was really cool, and just being able to meet her and hear her talk about all that, and then get the 10th anniversary book and just kind of, even though it was only a few years back that we picked up our first copy of it. But it's just made us want to read it all over again. So it's just, I feel like we're buzzing on just the spirit that she in this book carries, which is just like a love for, deep cut genre.
And the inclusion, and like how she's shining a light and actually helping forge careers in this space.
Yeah.
That's why
Yes.
it's hard to describe what this thing is. Like
Yes.
The House of Psychotic Women is more than a book. It's a movement that actually impacts people's lives and careers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Like,
And your own film, Sissy, was included in the 10th anniversary edition as well.
I know.
Yeah.
How did you guys feel about that?
Okay. So we're standing on the rooftop of some hotel in Montreal. It's the closing ceremony, awards, whatever. We're standing looking at this beautiful sunset. Sam Zimmerman, who's the VP and head programmer of Shudder, introduces us to Kat, and we're like, oh my God, we love House of Psychotic Women. And she looks at us with a straight face and says, you're in it, right? Sissy's in it. And Sam was like, I didn't tell you because I wanted to see the expression that's on your faces right now. And we totally dorked out in front of her, but it was just like totally surreal.
Yeah, we straight away were like, what? Get out of here. You're kidding, man. And we were like, went red, and we looked at Sam and we were like, did you know about this? Because like, why wouldn't you have told us? And he was like, I just wanted to see the look in your faces. And we were texting him just the other day being like, hey man, we're like going to talk to Anna about this book. And he was like, man, the highlight of my year was seeing your faces.
Yeah. We were not cool about it.
We had just gone to watch this like 3-hour long or something like talk that she did in this lecture hall, and we hadn't met her, so she's like this rock star to us.
Yeah. And then also all the filmmakers that we met at Fantasia that are like, we're in the book too, and we're like, we know, like, isn't it cool?
Honestly, at that point, and actually still now, is the coolest. I feel the coolest thing that's happened to us with this film. This whole, because it means something, because not only is it like material in like a digital world, like I'm actually holding it, but also just because of the films that are in here, like it's surreal to us. And this is what we geeked out to Kayla about, was like, we were like a bit shocked going, but we just bought your older copy while we were researching our film. And she was like, and now it's in there. And we were like, that's surreal. That is a total bookend for the experience that was making.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a moment.
I love that. I would love to see your faces in that moment. And this is, I mean, it's such a wonderful bookend, like you say. So tell me about kind of how you mentioned that you picked up the book while you were researching Sissy during the writing and the development process. Kind of how did it impact the writing? How did it impact the film? And I guess specifically the titular Psychotic Women is Sissy. Although, I don't want to spoil the film for anyone who hasn't seen it, who might be listening to this, which they should. Sissy, now available in Shudder globally, I believe.
Sam's just trading you money right now in the background. Like, you concocted this whole story and it's working. How did it?
Okay, can I read out our references that we got from the list to start with?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
These were all things that we had been watching when we found them.
And there are so many new ones that have been added, which I feel like we need to mention as well. But like Antichrist is actually a reference for Sissy. Black Swan, massive reference. Repulsion. Whatever happened to Baby Jane? I watched that movie when I was 12 with my mum, and I was like, what the fuck was that? And it really excited me, and I didn't know what that would lead to someday. Bird with the Crystal Plumage. Queen of Earth was a massive reference. The Loved Ones, Sean Byrne, like Australian iconography. The colourful nightmare that is Sissy comes directly from that movie. Repulsion, Sisters, Three Women, and Fatal Attraction.
And we were surprised actually when reading the book and trying to flick through it again that single white female is not in there, which was one of our biggest references. But Fatal Attraction, kind of released not too far apart, was also a reference for us, and it I don't know why I relate those two films. They've got completely different casts.
Well, I think
one's Adrian Lyne, one is
problematic portrayal of borderline personality disorder, right?
Yeah, and that's where I was going with it. Was like,
but also they became cultural touchdowns, because I write about Fatal Attraction in my book, kind of in the chapter about, quote unquote crazy women, and Fatal Attraction and Single White Female both became sort of shorthand, cultural shorthand, which happens really rarely for movies. That everybody instantly will associate the title of the film with a certain type of behavior, and specifically with like a gender, like, you've been single white female or something, when instantly what that means, what that's a reference to.
And that reminds me, that's why the two films always kind of remind me of each other, even though they're completely different films, is that they were probably our two main references in going back to how quote unquote psychotic women were represented, at least in that era, 80s, 90s, and there was always the shot of the pills behind the medical cabinet that weren't taken. There was the diagnosis that she has borderline personality disorder or she's bipolar. And it was always this idea that crazy women in films, A, are the villains, and also B, have a mental disorder. And one of the first things that we took from going through the book was like, we have to go beyond that. We can't just say that Sissy is the way she is because she's off her meds. Like, as a society, we've moved beyond that kind of stereotyping of mental condition, and so it forced us to try, I think, to represent whatever Cecilia's condition is. It's not actually really, hopefully when you watch the movie, it's not, you don't think, oh, what's the diagnosis? It's actually more about the pain she's felt because of what she's gone through in relation to her friendship and things like that. It's
and the strange way, the weird and wacky way that her repressed rage, her needing to honor her inner child who wasn't able to respond to the bullying, like the way that permeated in her life as an adult. It's about bigger things than like a condition which is not portrayed accurately necessarily in a film that needs to make lots of money at a box office.
So I think they became like mirror films for, in many ways, what to do in terms of the filmmaking. They're brilliant movies, but also what not to do.
And I would love for you to keep throwing in how how you developed and worked on Sissy, because it's always a privilege to hear kind of the behind the scenes stuff from filmmakers. But I wanted to move on to the film we're actually here to talk about. So when I invited you on the podcast, and as I've been doing with all the guests for this miniseries, I offered you to pick any film that's covered in the book out of the 200 in the first edition, 300 in the second one. And you came back really straight away with a couple of suggestions, but I wanted to ask you, why did you pick Carrie?
I mean, how can you not pick Carrie? It's like we were like, wait, no one else is doing this? And you were like, no. And we were like, okay, look, this either makes us look like we don't go past like a famous film, like it's not a deep cut, but at the same time, if it brings more audiences to this movie, all the better, because to us, and I think she actually backs it up in her book, Kayla, like it is the pinnacle, or not the pinnacle because it's already
the first of its kind.
It's kind of like, it's where when you want to make a film about someone who's being bullied and essentially like you go straight to Carrie. It's just kind of the holy grail of that.
And so much of the DNA of Sissy is Carrie. And we watched it again this afternoon just to refresh, and it was like, wow, there are things that we don't even realize that we stole. You know?
Right, like her having her period, like her period in the shower, obviously at the beginning, obviously is famous, but like, I mean, you know, in a very small way in our film, it's like Cecilia gets her period, goes to buy some tampons. Like there's so many things from that film that I think we were nodding at. Sometimes
the glitter gore,
the glitter gore of the prom, like just the fact that she's standing in front of that sparkly background covered in blood, like there's
sparkles in the blood,
there's so much that I think we willingly were referencing, and then so much that we didn't even realize we had put in there, and upon rewatching it now after finishing the movie and just living with it for 3 or 4 years, it's like, oh wow, like there's stuff that was just deeply embedded in us, I think.
Like it's very basic bitch of us to choose Carrie, but it's also perfect. Like it's a perfect film.
Yeah. And also like we were just as inspired by things like Mean Girls, but you don't get Mean Girls without Carrie.
No.
Like that
it's very true.
Even the way you have like the Queen Bee, right? Like the Nancy Allen character, and then you also have like Sue, who's like the nice, cool girl. Like that very much is Hannah's character. That's Emma in Sissy, you know, like it's her idea to send her boyfriend to invite Carrie to take her to the prom because it would be a nice thing. And all along you're kind of wondering like, are they for real? Like, are they just doing this as part of a kind of like, are they going to be revealed as just as bad as their friends and that this is all part of the act? And then you're like, no, like they genuinely were trying to do a nice thing, but it was their naivety that this would work.
And their flippantness.
And you know, like when the teacher is saying to them, to Sue and her boyfriend, Tommy, I think it is, right?
Yeah.
When she talks to them being like, but how's it going to look? Think about it. You're going to arrive at the prom with Carrie White. And she's like, Sue's like, well, we don't care what it looks like. But that's kind of like what you get in horror movies where there's like this warning, right? It's like there's the old man whose eyes are white and he can't see anymore. He's like, don't go up that hill there because that house is haunted. You know, like that's the warning that they get, and they don't listen. And they go ahead and they go to her house, and they and Tommy, you know, who's 30 years old, but that's okay. He invites Carrie to the prom. He insists that she comes with him, that she won't take no for an answer. And you can argue that it all goes down because of that.
The moral ambiguity, the guilt and the shame. And,
yeah. And I think all of those things are just what we basically built our screenplay off from day one. So it's kind of hard to, it would be disingenuous to not do Carrie out of any movie, let alone movies that are in this particular book. So I think we were flirting with sisters because we thought like, let's be cool filmmakers. Let's be cool and do a lesser known Brian De Palma joint. But I think this is just the obvious one. Yeah.
I mean, I love both Carrie and Sisters. So I have De Palma is probably one of my favorite problematic faves.
Yeah. As
in, like, I know that he's probably not the nicest person, and I know a lot of his choices are incredibly sleazy, but god damn it, I love his films.
The zooms and the split screens. We were so unhappy the day we figured out we couldn't get a split screen in Sissy. It just didn't happen, but we were talking about it all through the edit. So, you know, just his formalism, his aesthetic was I think was really
genius.
A spirit with us the whole time. But I know what you're saying about everything else.
But so I wanted to ask you guys personally, what is your relationship with Carrie? Kind of when did you first encounter this film? And, you know, you speak so much about how it influenced Sissy in particular, but what is your personal relationship with the film and how has it changed over the years and rewatches?
I mean, I watched Carrie as a kid, but I had repressed that and returned to it, you know, 5 years ago. How about you?
Yeah, well, I think I first saw it when I was at film school. So I was kind of, you know, I got bitten by the film bug, went to film school, and I just started to gorge on things.
Right as this book was coming out.
Which would have been around that time. Yeah, well, like a little bit earlier. That's very sweet of you that you think I was at film school only 10 years ago, but close. Close.
I was graduating.
Close.
Sorry.
Maybe
Sorry, old man.
12, 14 years. Who's counting? But yeah, I just fell in love with it right off the bat. I fell in love with De Palma. I kind of discovered De Palma through Scorsese, who was kind of like one of my first loves. And then I got into that whole kind of, rat pack.
The New Hollywood Gang.
The New Hollywood Gang. Oh my God. I read every book on the New Hollywood Gang. I just wanted to be in that gang so bad.
You still want to be in
Yeah.
that gang.
And, and there's such a lot, and you look back on it now and you're like, they're all dudes. Like, they all came from, upper middle class economic backgrounds.
With mummy issues.
But
Yeah.
Brian De Palma.
Every single one of them. You're so right.
That's how the feminism shone through.
But yeah, it's just one of those things that you come across. I never read the book. I've still never read the book. But it's just one of my favorite movies, honestly. And I should read the book. I've never done the Stephen King.
You absolutely should.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we
It's
need
weird.
to become Stephen King readers, as opposed to just the
Just
filtration.
Just cinema hounds. But it's amazing. I read this fact the other day that Carrie was the very first book that Stephen King ever sold. It was the first.
It's true.
Yeah, and it's number 1 out of 100 things that have been adapted. Like, it's the first that got adapted, and he was 26 years old.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah, and in fact, he was. I remember reading in his nonfiction books. I really recommend. He's got the book on craft, which is about writing, and then he's got this book of essays called Dance Macabre, which is one of my favorite pieces of nonfiction ever, which is all about kind of horror and horror culture in literature and movies. And he writes, it's known that he was working as a janitor in a high school, I think, when he was, writing in his spare time. And when he sold Carrie changed everything for him and for his wife, Tabitha. Like, they went from, that kind of, working those types of jobs and writing in their spare time to, oh, there's no going back after this. And once the adaptation started, he is still to this day, I believe, the most adapted author in the world. Every month there's a new Stephen King adaptation, either series or remake or new film. And the impact that Carrie, both novel and film, really had on the look, I think, and the vibe of Stephen King adaptations. The whole, his well-trodden quote, that actually the monsters in his books are the humans and rarely the actual, creatures that populate them. Really starts with Carrie, because I think one of the things I've spoken with about Carrie on the podcast before, but it's one of the books and the films that I keep coming back to because it was so momentous. Like, it felt momentous watching it. It feels like I take something new from it every single time I rewatch it. And this kind of idea of Carrie is become this emblem of a psychotic woman, a teenage girl who just snaps and breaks and, commits this massacre. But I never really thought of her, and I continue to not think of her as the villain in her own story. And I was wondering kind of what you think about that, about the dynamics and the girl with the powers versus the mean girls, and who the actual monster in the film is.
I think you've touched upon something that, again, I didn't realize we inherited massively, which is the protagonist as villain. We know, but that those are the most effective stories for us, I think, as filmmakers, as creatives, because really the monsters do live inside the humans, and really the biggest monsters in our generation especially live within our own head, like our outlook on the world, which is so hard. It's so hard to be positive today with so much exposure to such bleak news across the world and what we're heading towards. And I think Carrie was kind of the first of its kind to really tap into the psychosis of being othered. And that was definitely like a springboard for us. Like, if Carrie was othered and ostracized by the social group, how does Cecilia other herself as a way of protecting herself? Because Carrie wants to belong, and that's her demise.
And she's totally a victim. Like, she's bullied in every aspect of her life. You know, it's not just the mean girls at school. It's like the kid who skates past her in the street at the beginning.
Her mother wants to murder her.
Yeah.
Mom,
Like,
yeah.
her mom is like the ultimate bully. Speaking of, I mean, I've skipped the page now, but there's this amazing quote in Kayla's book, which just basically talks about like how maybe Carrie's mom is kind of like one of the greatest villains in horror history, because, you know, like there's nothing scarier than a horrible mother. Because like if you think about just like the bastardization, like the what would you call it? Like the perversion of the sanctity of motherhood. She's she's religious, but she's really just mentally ill. And so Carrie is just this sweet, innocent fawn who basically
she's practicing agency.
She's deeply traumatized because she's basically inherited this intergenerational trauma from her mother. And we don't ever really, you know, get to know too much about why her mother's that way. Obviously, the father's not around and all that because he runs off with this other woman because, you know, for whatever reason, she became that religious. But, you know, it's like, I don't know. I just think the way Kayla talks about Carrie in her book about how, you know, she also at school would get locked in lockers and teased, and how part of, you know, her being at school was just kind of learning to survive, and
the sort of social paranoia of growing up, you know, which we can all relate to,
and how messed up that is for kids to go through that when their brain's still growing. I just think like, you know, that's a real horror. Like that's like a real direct consequence of mental illness, which I think is but again, not to stereotype mental illness. Maybe she's just a religious zealot and that's that. But you've got to think that comes from some form of mental illness. At least that's how it's talked about in Kayla's book. And I just think that's like the most insidious kind, because it's happening in every other house right now, you know, and there's no...
And it's amplified on social media, and kids are growing up with social media now. And so like, what would Carrie look like today online? You know, that's terrifying to me.
And I think a lot of that was just where we came to the character of Sissy. It was just kind of like, you know, we don't get into the background or to the family or anything like that on purpose, but there were ideas thrown around about we were like, what if we explored, you know, her mother character or something like that. What if her mother
was her psychologist and there were no boundraries and all of that
and
stuff.
She was a problematic character, and I think a lot of that was coming from Carrie. But
Carrie already did it.
we're like we're not going to do it better than Carrie. So let's just do something.
I am fascinated by the taboo aspect of it as well. I mean, when I've since rewatched Carrie as an adult, like certain things come into the forefront when you're watching it as an adult versus as a teenager. I grew up reading Stephen King, so like I remember reading Carrie and only then watching the movie. So the Carrie that I carried with me was the one from the book, which was very different from the one in the movie. But there is such a layer of shame throughout the whole film, which I found so interesting, particularly even the shame and the taboo of even considering or seeing a bad mother, a terrifying mother on screen. And oh my God, Piper Laurie is fucking terrifying in the film because there is no off switch. And because whether she is mentally unstable or just a religious zealot, as you say, in either direction, she has no off switch. And Carrie is just one more thing that she gets to kind of enact her beliefs on or her instability on. And the sense of shame that she feels about herself, that's very obvious, you know, when she calls, like the way she speaks about her own body, or the, you know, the husband or the man who ran off, or the way she talks about Carrie's body as well in the film, the whole dirty pillow speech and all this stuff. It's like, wow, every single thing that comes out of her mouth is just soaking in shame. And she so desperately wants to transplant that onto Carrie. And there's like those traces of that, I think, in Sissy as well, of this sense of, well, I can't, you know, if I'm receiving this treatment, like the amount of work that she's clearly done that we don't see in the film to sort of put behind those feelings, but they're never fully gone.
Yeah, it's a superficial layer, and she's just, her psychosis is bubbling at the surface because she hasn't actually done the work on herself. She's just projecting out a reality that she desperately wants for herself. But like, there was a moment when we watched Carrie today where, you know, the mother is like smiling as she's murdering her daughter because she's finally killing her sin, right?
Yes, exactly.
And it's like, oh, it's just, it gives you shivers. And you watch Carrie shoot the daggers into her mother, and then her mother takes the final poses like the martyr, like the Jesus figure in the closet. And Carrie's kind of like fascinated by what she's done, but then she looks away, like she can't be accountable for the murder that's taking place. And I realized again, like that's what we did with Cecilia. Like there's not glee in the killings, but there's this sort of like, I'm not actually here right now. I'm not doing this. I'm not responsible for this, for my behavior or my actions. And there's crossover.
Yeah, which, you know, is disassociation or whatever you call it in moments of trauma. But also, I think, you know, I think we were poking a little more fun in a kind of satirical way, you know, just the lack of accountability with self-victimizers. Whereas I think in Carrie's case, it's like
she's a victim. She's
looking away because no, you know, 16-year-old kid or whatever should see her mother with like 6 butcher knives in her.
And Carrie's so likable.
It's totally understand. Yeah, she's so sweet. She's so sweet. She's so sweet. Like just the extents that, you know, the script, and I don't know if it's like this in the book, but tell me if it is, but the extents to which the script and especially De Palma go to you know, to paint her, like her last name's White, right? She's pure. You know, she's not just virginal, but she's so like, she's never had a period for the first time, and she freaks out. Like she's that innocent to the world that no one has even told her what that is, you know, and she comes home and she's on the floor and she's holding him up, you know, she's like, why didn't you tell me, Mama?
Mama.
She's so innocent. It's like ridiculous how innocent she is, and then she massacres people 90 minutes later, and it's like that is a huge arc to pull off in one movie.
But she's innocent to the very end, even because she buries herself with her sin.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, like I think in general that character arc was something that we were like, okay, you know, how do we pull off a character arc where someone goes from kind of so sweet at the beginning to, you know, I don't know if, you know, no spoilers, but to what happens at the end of our film. Now it's nothing compared to Carrie. Like it's really, I think we tried to take a little more of like a this could happen approach. You know, but we did it at one point. We thought like, what if she was telekinetic? And then we were like, well, then we're just making
Carrie.
We're just doing Carrie again. So like, it was one of those things where we had to find a new way in because that story had been so well done.
Yeah.
And how much do you think that likability and that innocence is down to Sissy Spacek's performance?
100%.
A lot of
best casting of all time. We were talking about that earlier today.
It's one of those rare perfect castings where it's like they just look right, they sound right, everything.
She looks slightly creepy, but like also incredibly beautiful and naive, and you just endow her with so much innocence and purity, and like the inner child within Sissy Spacek is so strong. Like you can't help but agree with her that she should murder that. Even the teacher who's on her side.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, really? Why?
Because, you know, it's got to go there. And that's something that I noticed on the rewatch was like, you've always got to kind of kill off the character who is seemingly innocent, but also in a way whose inaction led to this happening.
She's responsible too.
Just as much as the perpetrators.
Because she's slapping the teenagers around. Like there's a whole subplot of Carrie where the teacher's having a slow burn mental breakdown. And like,
oh yeah, it's very 70s. It's like, oh, you're skimping class. I'm just gonna slap the shit out of you.
And she's like, you're not gonna get away with this. And the teacher's like, yeah, I probably shouldn't get away with it. Like,
I feel like in the age of Netflix, we can surely have a limited series about Carrie's like phys ed teacher.
Yeah.
You know?
The predecessor is Tina Fey in Mean Girls. Straight copy.
Totally.
Straight copy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very true.
Yeah.
And also, like, we haven't even talked about this, but like the most obvious thing is that when we were thinking of what to call Sissy, we literally were like, it came from Sissy Spacek.
Yeah.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. It was like, we were literally, because now you look at it and you're like, oh, it's Sissy the Sissy and her name's Cecilia and it's seemingly all about what the theme is. But it's like, the reality is when we were writing, we were like, what's this character's name? And we were talking about Carrie and we're like,
creepy Carrie.
What about it's too obvious to do Carrie, let's do Sissy, you know, it's got a S sound to it, it sounds menacing. And then we work backwards and we're like, well, what's Sissy short for? Cecilia. So that's where that came from. So it's directly tied to this movie.
I love this. And I do agree with you that it does make sense that she sort of buries herself. It makes perfect character sense. It makes perfect plot sense. But it's also, you know, a part of that, everything now kind of leaves everything open up to sequels or franchising or series and whatnot. And I have to say, like, I love the fact that despite the fact that there is a sequel that has nothing to do with Carrie White, and that there's a very little scene 2002 attempt at a series of Carrie with Angela Bettis where she does survive, and essentially that it's now been, I think, recut as a film, but the intent was that was the episode that would then set Carrie free and she would, you know, go be a telekinetic menace onwards instead of just burying herself with Massacre. But there's something really timeless about the performance. Like, as much as De Palma's direction feels very of the 70s, the performance of Sissy Spacek is just like, every time I watch it, it could have, you know, just landed on Netflix today. It could have just, you know, been in an HBO series today. There's something so tender. So tender about her performance that you want to protect her always. Yeah. And I remember that's also how I felt reading the book. It's like, oh no, oh sweetie, no. Like, please, just one person to help you out in a way that actually helps you instead of helping themselves, which is what Sue does. Like, she's not really trying to help Carrie. She's just trying to help herself.
Yeah.
It's kind of so remarkable how sweet and good-natured she is through like most of the movie, considering the amount of shit that she cops in her life. Like, she should be like a psychopath I wouldn't even think of her as a psychopath. She just snapped, and in a moment's rage, you know,
she was right in her actions.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that, you know, the teacher doesn't deserve to die, but you know, in those moments, it's like, and she would have killed Sue as well if Sue hadn't like been locked out of the gym in the first place.
Yeah.
So
I liked the morality play of all of that. That was really fun. And I think that, like, Sissy Spacek, she's such a genius, but also in Three Women, she plays like the opposite end of the same character. You want to kill that character. She is so freaking annoying and needy.
But she's so naive that you have empathy for her because she's just like a Bambi in the world.
Yeah, totally. But like, you defend Carrie to the end. Like, you like, I'm with you. You're my martyr.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And what do you make of I mean, I don't even know how to call it, or, you know, even how to quantify its influence, but Carrie's massacre of the high school, the prom massacre that starts when the pig's blood lands in her head. What do you guys make of that? The scene, the true scene of rage and violence that we get in this film.
I mean, it's just amazing. I've never.
It's like a music video.
Yeah, like it just goes to full red, split screen,
slow motion, like the dangle of the pig's blood above the glitter.
Yeah,
it's just.
It's a clashing
Chef's
of worlds.
Kiss. Yeah.
And you know, like that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, are there other movies that like that are such a good mix of kind of glitter and blood, like pre-Carrie or just after? Like, I feel like that was one of our only references to like a film that really went there.
The genesis of glittergore.
There's not really a lot of gore in Carrie. It's really just blood.
Yeah.
You know, and it's pig's blood. It's not even
Yeah.
human blood.
Yeah.
But it's the idea.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they're all in there burning, and they're locked in there. You know, it's
All their hopes and dreams.
It's what you don't see. It's what's left to the imagination. That's even worse, I think. And
The movie that I think of is actually The Loved Ones,
Yeah.
well, that's true.
which also has a lot of glitter and a hell of a lot more gore than Carrie does.
That's true. That's got a shit ton of gore. I mean, there's literally like a cave of people under the ground.
It's,
But anyway,
it's like a gleeful, cracked disco ball, that movie. I love
But I did want to ask you, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, Hannah, but what do you mean when you talk about glitter gore?
I think someone gave us that term.
I don't know where it came from. It was some.
Did you give us that term? Someone gave us that term.
I definitely asked you about it at the Q&A we did at Edinburgh.
Well, then maybe
You may have coined it.
you
Hannah.
may have.
Did I coin it? I need to stop coining things. I coined so many things. I don't lose track.
Let's just say that you coined it right there
Okay.
at the Q&A in Edinburgh, because we were talking a lot about kind of psycho Disney pop, how that was something that was a phrase that got us through the edit of Sissy. You know, it's psycho Disney pop. That's something that our editor Margie really came up with, and we just kind of wrote it on the wall. But I think glittergore has almost like replaced that recently, because it's just so it's such a cool clashing of words.
The alliteration is peak.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.
I do love alliteration, so it sounds like something I would come up with. But I mean,
what does it mean? I don't know. It means exactly what it sounds. It's those two things stuck together. You know,
Blood infused with problematic glitter, and we need more of it. I think we need more of it. Yeah.
I think, when I'm thinking back to when we spoke at Edinburgh, and one of the things I really loved about Sissy, and there's a couple of other things films that I think of in that space, it's the combination of the high femme aesthetic, all the girly stuff, all the stuff that we're told is just superficial and flighty, like glitter, and then all the horrific shit that goes on in these films, the violence, the gore, the emotional violence as well that happens. And emotional violence, I think, is a distinctively female space. Like the way that women and girls are cruel to each other in such an offhanded way, but piercing to the very core of your soul. I genuinely think that's, I don't know if I'm stealing this quote from someone or if I'm just thinking out loud, but, when, men have wars, we just have like emotional cruelty. Like from a very, very young age. Like no one is as mean as small girls are.
No, and like the core of all Y2K feminist comedies, like extending into the mid 20-teens, it's all about female cruelty, social ostracization, which is a killer. Like genuinely, psychologically, when we're excluded from the herd, we die. But like that's just our biological history. So I feel like, stories about women explore that more than in any other genre. And I just think that's why it's so ripe in horror, because you can squish some heads and pop out some eyeballs to make it all the more fun. Let's make fun of it all.
but I do think a lot of that comes straight from that scene in Carrie, which is what you were getting at.
I think so too.
It's inspired so much.
The breaking of the tiara, which has become another cultural touchstone in pop culture.
Yes.
From Mean Girls, that's right out of Carrie. Like, it's sometimes it's like almost shot for shot, like that room.
And just the look, just the pink and blue lighting, and the all of that stuff. The kind of it's 76 Carrie, but it's got what we associate with that kind of 80s prom aesthetic. So
and it's an aesthetic that's coming back. Like even look at Olivia Rodrigo and kind of this very again like a completely new generation looking back at Y2K and kind of these images, and she got into some shit because Courtney Love thought that she was stealing from her, and Courtney Love at the same time is taken from Carrie, and from that, oh my god, from Jawbreaker, that movie with Rose McGowan, which is cruel.
So
It's one of the
fun.
nastiest films I've ever seen.
Oh my god! When you see that the jawbreaker in her throat, like
the ball in her throat, like a snake digesting.
you can't get
something.
that feeling out of your body.
Yeah, I mean that's a glitter gore movie right there. Like I know it's pitched as a teen girl movie, but that is horrific.
Horrific.
That's true. I mean that really is a glitter gore film.
But I was traumatized by like Crossroads, Mean Girls, even like Bridesmaids. There's social horror in those movies.
Yeah, because they're social ostracization
Because
scenarios.
my fears as a woman, it's all purely psychological. It's people not liking me, my space. Like I'm not worthy of taking up space. I don't belong here. I don't deserve to have a voice. Like that's all amplified in those comedies in like a digestible way. And, you know, I think it all stems from Carrie. And it's so funny that it was told by a man in words and then redelivered by a man visually because it's so feminist. Like it just works. I don't know.
Well, it's in.
And
sorry.
Before I let you guys go, I did want to ask you, you know, out of everything that was spoken about Carrie and its deep influence on Sissy and House of Psychotic Women, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you wanted to bring up?
I don't know, not really. I mean, we mentioned The Loved Ones, which I'm glad we did because that's really, you know, kind of shout out to Australian horror. Lives well in that lineage.
Yeah, you guys are messed up. The most fucked up horror films I've seen in the last 10 years have been Australian.
It's because we're isolated and the world, and also we have a really dark convict history. Like there are a lot of really nasty butcher psychopaths in our history.
Yeah.
So I feel like the ghosts are kind of like permeating their way through the generations.
and although I think we have a very like, you know, kind of tongue-in-cheek, dry kind of like sardonic approach to a lot of things, our horror tends to be quite grisly, I feel. But at the same time, there's been a lot of satire in the past. I mean, whether it's, you know, like, you know, Razorback or like Long Weekend or like a lot of these films have a satirical edge to them. But I feel like Loved Ones just turned it up a dial and wasn't afraid to be essentially a comedy horror, or a horror tinged with comedy, I think, in a way that kind of hadn't necessarily been done maybe as extravagantly or as flamboyantly in the past.
I would like to offer Muriel's Wedding to anyone who's listening because that's a huge part of our cinematic canon.
Yeah.
And again, Y2K coming of age, psychological comedy.
It's a dramedy. It's not a horror,
but it's pitched as a broad comedy, and there are definitely horror elements. The mum shoves herself into an oven and kills herself.
Well, spoilers.
If that's not scary, I don't know.
No, but it's very Muriel's Wedding. We always said it's like Carrie meets Muriel's Wedding. Like that's really, if Muriel suddenly started getting telekinetic powers and killing all of her friends, then you would have like the Australian version of Carrie.
Yeah.
So that's kind of.
And she was planning her wedding at the same time.
Yeah, she just wanted to get married. Never mind these telekinetic powers.
That's what I want to see. If someone does another, like a reboot of Carrie, it's when she's getting married.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, we should pitch that.
Like she climbs out.
You should.
She climbs out of the grave, you know.
In a way.
Maybe someone listening to this will be like, here's a whole bunch of money. You should make Carrie gets married.
Hey, shut it. Carrie climbed out of that grave and crawled along to Motel 6 and, you know, got her shit together.
Cleaned herself up and...
Yeah. And eventually...
Went to therapy.
Yeah. Re-enrolled, got into college somehow.
And started becoming obsessed with Vogue Bridal.
Yeah, telekinetic powers alive all the way along. But yeah, Muriel's Wedding. It's funny. Like I feel like Muriel's Wedding kind of became like the North Star of the film, which in a way has nothing to do with the genre, but it's just like Carrie maybe is the American kind of touch point for kind of bullying narratives. Muriel's Wedding
was the Australian.
It was for us when we were growing up. It was on Friday night TV every weekend, and you would just like the way that she's bullied by her friend group just kind of became our, I guess, like cinematic touchstone for bullying. So, that's a good pull.
Muriel is a final girl as well. She survived her own neuroses.
Yeah, there you go. She should be in this book. Come on, Kayla.
I'm into this rereading of Muriel's Wedding. Never thought about it this way.
Go back and rewatch it now. Yeah.
And before Ripple Pop, I just wanted to ask you guys, I'm not going to ask about the remakes. I've seen them kind of angrily, all of them, except Carrie to the Rage, which I stands alone because I actually think it's a film that doesn't need to be a Carrie sequel. The Carrie stuff you can just sort of ignore when it happens, but as a film, it's quite interesting. But not a fan of the Kimberly Pierce one, and the 2002 sort of weird series remake should have worked, but really doesn't. So, but there is something about the 76 one and only Carrie that still resonates today. And I was wondering, kind of as closing thoughts, what do you think about Carrie still rings so true?
I think we all are Carrie. I think that today, whether you're a child, an adult, you're in your pubescent years, or you're just trying to navigate a world that exists primarily online, we're all gazing at each other, asking for acceptance through like this highly filtered void. And that's Carrie, her social setting, her trying to find agency in an incredibly traumatic environment when all odds are stacked against her. Like, we're all in that mindset on a daily basis because we're plugged into our phones asking for likes and follows. So
yeah, it's kind of terrifying to think how Carrie would have done if she was a 16-year-old today, especially with that mother. But yeah, I mean, what it just reminds me is just that we all tap on the neuroses of our parents, and the sooner we admit that, accept that, the sooner we can move on with healing
and getting into therapy and not blowing up.
Therapy for Carrie, therapy for everyone.
Yes.
That's it.
Let's do In Treatment with Gabriel Byrne and Carrie White.
Yes.
Carrie is what happens to Matilda if she doesn't get adopted by Miss Honey.
100%. If Miss Honey started slapping people around, yeah.
That's the pitch.
You can have it.
Such a gracious host.
Hannah, Kane, thank you so much for your time and for your insight on House of Psychotic Women, on Carrie, and also on your own film, which, by the way, for anyone listening, where can they find and watch Sissy online, and where can they follow you?
They can find Sissy exclusively on Shudder.
You're not getting paid extra for this.
I'm not. I just love love Shudder. I love the team at Shudder. They are so cool. I want to be them. So yeah, it's Shudder, and then you can find Sissy at sissy.movie, and also us, we're at HBAR and at Kane Senes.
And also, if you happen to be listening to this and are in Australia, Sissy is playing in your local cinema now.
Tomorrow.
So, well, by the time of release of this podcast,
Yeah.
Go and see it before it ends up on Shudder here as well.
Yeah.
So.
Amazing. Beautiful plugs. Well done on the plugs.
Thank you. They're all plugged at this point.